We're going to take a look at the Worldview Triangle. If you look online for something called the 3D Gospel, you will find additional resources, and that's a source of a number of things that have helped me in better understanding these things. I first want to say about myself is that my connection is with the global West. Having grown up in the United States, what we'll look at here, I am not fluent, so to speak, in all of these worldviews. So the one that's most natural for me to talk about is what connects with the global West. I'll describe the others the best I can, and the wonderful thing in our church is we have people who can better describe these other aspects of people's worldviews. So the three major worldviews at the points of the triangle, we'll talk about guilt and innocence, and we'll talk about fear and power, and we'll talk about shame and honor. And so something to highlight about each of these is kind of the fundamental idea about it, that in guilt and innocence, the central idea is an objective standard. And often we speak about that objective standard as law. And it could be the law in society, or it could be a moral law, or the law of God. In fear and power, we tend to think about power itself, unsurprisingly. But very often, this power is a spiritual power. And so things that have get a lot of attention are thinking about spirits and powers that are beyond what we can see, and yet they affect us and we experience them. But I think that a power orientation also can apply when the powers aren't necessarily specifically in the spiritual realm as well. In shame and honor, fundamental orientation is about family and relationships. And so what's very important is how I connect with other people. And just to say briefly that guilt and innocence fits very well with cultures that are individualistic. And shame and honor fits very well with cultures that are more collectivist. And as we go through these, just to highlight, in general, the global West tends to be toward the part of the triangle that's on guilt and innocence. The global East, including the Middle East and further east, tends to be oriented towards shame and honor. And as a very rough approximation, the global South has a greater orientation to fear and power. So, looking back to guilt and innocence, we think about the problem. That our real problem in guilt and innocence culture is guilt. When I do something that violates the objective standard. And the goal is innocence. And so I want to show that somehow I'm okay. I've done the right thing. It's not against the standard. The problem in a fear and power culture is vulnerability. When there are powers that can harm me, and I can't stop that. And so the goal is security and well-being. So I want to be in a place of safety. And in the shame and honor cultures, the problem is shame and separation. That often when shame is encountered, one of the solutions to that shame is that the source of the same shame is separated. And so the goal is honor and connection. So when we look at when a problem comes, so for instance in guilt and innocence, when the problem comes of guilt, then the solution tends to be either punishment, that some payment is made, or forgiveness. That there needs to be a statement that says this standard somehow is not being enforced, that there's a release from that. In Fear and Power, the solution is a powerful hero. And so in some cultures, this relates to a witch doctor or a patron saint or a spiritual force that is on our side. And in Shame and Honor, the solution is reconciliation. It's restoring that relationship. So in the Bible, we have each of these represented. And so we have, for guilt and innocence, we have forgiveness. That if we confess our sins, then we say, He is faithful and just and will forgive us. This is from 1 John 1. The Fear and Power, Ephesians tells us about God's incomparably great power that is at work for us who believe, from Ephesians 1. And Ephesians also talks about, for Shame and Honor, talks about our adoption to sonship in Ephesians 1. That we are changed from being enemies of God to being His friends. When I look at this, I realize that my gospel growing up was too small. That I thought that the gospel was entirely about guilt and innocence, and the other things, maybe you could describe it in ways that fit that, but it really was about guilt and innocence. And what's been wonderful for me is to encounter people and resources that have helped me see that the gospel includes all of these things, that others have helped me better understand aspects of God and of the gospel I was completely blind to. So this is the joy that I have come to have a larger and more accurate view of God. And I'm better able to read the Bible because of ways people have helped me to see worldviews that were not a part of my experience growing up.